Welcome back, everyone. Tonight we are stepping into a world that is foggy, chaotic, unpredictable, and surprisingly full of flavor. Though not always in a way you would expect. I invite you to close your eyes for a moment. Imagine Victorian London at its peak. A sprawling industrial city bursting with noise, ambition, poverty, and hunger. In an era before refrigerators, before safety standards, and long before anyone understood what bacteria was. The people of London found creative, bizarre, and sometimes shocking ways to fill their stomachs. And that is the story we are exploring tonight. Before we dive in, take a second to get comfortable. Dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And settle in with a warm drink. Because this journey is not a glamorous royal banquet. Is not a polished dining hall in Buckingham Palace. And it is definitely not Victorian fine dining with silver platters and perfect manners. No, tonight we are walking through the crowded markets, the muddy alleys, the street corners, and the working-class neighborhoods where real Londoners lived, worked, and ate. Our question is simple. What did ordinary people actually eat? Not the elite, not the noble families, but the millions of workers, chimney sweeps, seamstresses, hawkers, coal-covered laborers, and exhausted children. People who roamed the streets from dawn until long past dusk. Their meals were cheap, fast, and designed for one purpose: survival. And in that struggle for survival, an entire food culture was born. One that modern audiences might find strange, unsettling, or even humorous. But beneath every odd ingredient and questionable recipe lies a real story about human endurance. So, let us set the scene together. It is early morning in 1854. You step out of a cramped one-room tenement, the kind shared by entire families, sometimes even multiple households. The air hits you instantly. A thick, smoky chill settles into your lungs, while the scent of coal, river mud, and yesterday's refuse lingers over the street. Horses clatter over cobblestones. Vendors shout from wooden carts. Factory whistles scream in the distance. And your stomach growls, reminding you that the most urgent task of the day is finding something, anything, to eat. But here's the catch. You are broke. You have only a few pennies in your pocket. And in Victorian London, a few pennies does not buy comfort. It buys desperation disguised as breakfast. There are no supermarkets, no labels, no expiry dates. What you eat will come from the hands of street sellers, tired, hardened, clever individuals who have learned to profit from whatever ingredients are cheapest that week. Some are honest. Many are not. But hunger does not negotiate. So you follow the crowds toward the nearest market, hoping for a warm meal. As you turn the corner, you see a cluster of stalls gathered around a narrow street. This is where the city's working class eats. Smoke rises from pans. Thick steam blurs the outlines of customers. You hear laughter, arguments, and coins clinking. You hear the rhythm of survival. There are pies on one table, boiling pots on another. Jars of pickles stacked beside a wooden bucket filled with something that looks like it once lived in the river. Children grip cups of hot, liquid. Men stand hunched over bowls, eating quickly before returning to the docks or factories. Women balance their meals on their laps, feeding themselves between sewing shifts. This is the heart of Victorian street food. And the most important thing you must understand is this. People did not eat bizarre foods because they loved them. They ate them because they had no choice. London in the 19th century was a city of extremes. The wealthy dined in candlelit rooms with roast meats and delicate puddings. But the poor and the working class, the majority, ate whatever the markets could offer at the lowest price. If that meant using scraps, leftovers, spoiled cuts, or river creatures most people today would never consider eating, so be it. Hunger does not ask permission. And yet, despite the hardship, there is something deeply human, almost inspiring, in how creative people became with their meals. Nothing was wasted. If an animal was butchered, every part of it nose to tail was eaten in some form. If the river offered an endless supply of eels, then eels became dinner, breakfast, lunch, and everything in between. If vegetables were wilted or bruised, they were chopped, boiled, pickled, or mashed until they became edible again. If a dish was not appetizing, you added vinegar, salt, or a splash of gin, and hoped for the best. That is where our journey begins, standing in the middle of a London market, surrounded by sights, smells, and sounds that would overwhelm the modern senses. By the end of tonight's story, you will have walked through the full menu of a world that feels distant, yet incredibly human. A world where meals did not just fill stomachs, they revealed truths about class, inequality, resilience, and the daily fight to keep going. So take a breath. Get ready. We are about to explore the strangest, most surprising foods that fueled Victorian London 1 penny at a time. From eel pies to pickled street snacks. From improvised condiments to questionable stews. This is the culinary underbelly of the 19th century. And trust me, after tonight, you will never look at your own pantry the same way again. As the morning market comes fully to life, you follow the stream of hungry workers toward one of the most iconic and unexpected staples of Victorian street cuisine, the eel pie. Today, eels might seem like an exotic delicacy or an unusual menu item reserved for niche restaurants. But in the 1800s, they were everyday fuel for London's working class. Cheap, plentiful, dependable, and surprisingly reliable in a city where every meal felt one step away from disaster. Imagine walking along the banks of the River Thames in 1854. The water is murky, the smell is thick, and the surface ripples gently with movement. Beneath those gray waves swim thousands upon thousands of eels. Stubborn, resilient creatures that can survive in polluted waters where most fish simply cannot. While the river became infamous for sewage and industrial waste, the eels just kept multiplying, slipping through mud, refuse, and current like nature survivors. And so, out of necessity, the people of London turned to them. That abundance made eels the perfect answer to the daily question: what can I afford to eat today? Beef and pork were luxuries. Salmon and cod were out of reach for most families. But eels were everywhere, caught in barrels, traps, nets, or sold for just a few pennies. For a starving city, this slippery resource became an unlikely hero. Now picture a narrow street near the docks. A small crowd gathers around a battered wooden food cart. A hand-painted sign reads, "Hot eel pies 1 penny." The vendor's sleeves are rolled up. His face is smudged with soot. He presses pastry into dented tin molds. Beside him, a large pot simmers with chopped eels, onions, herbs, pepper, and something that vaguely resembles gravy. The mixture is ladled into crusts, sealed, and placed over heat to bake. Steam rises into the cold air, carrying a scent that is somehow both fishy and comforting. You step forward. You hand over your precious penny, and the vendor passes you a pie wrapped in yesterday's newspaper, the ink smudging slightly against the warm crust. There is no fork, no plate, no ceremony. You eat with your hands, because that is how life works on these streets. Your first bite surprises you. The pastry is flaky and warm, a little greasy, but pleasant. Then comes the filling, soft, chewy, slightly rubbery, with a rich, briny flavor that tastes like the river itself. It is not elegant, but it is hearty. The pepper and onions do their best to tame the strong eel taste, while the fat gives it weight and warmth. For someone who has not eaten since the night before, this is a gift. Around you, others devour their pies in silence. A chimney sweep, still dusted in soot, tears into his breakfast. A seamstress picks out tiny bones with practiced fingers. A dock worker hunches over his pie, eating fast before the ships call him back. Nobody asks where the eels came from. Nobody questions the freshness. Nobody looks too closely at the oil floating on top of the pot. Hunger has its own rule book. And on page 1 it says, "Don't ask questions you do not want the answers to." But eel pie was not just food. It was survival, warmth in winter, strength on workdays, fuel for 14-hour shifts. Parents fed it to children. Workers grabbed it on the way to the docks. Women ate it between sewing, scrubbing, and laundry jobs. Entire streets became famous for their eel vendors. And even today, Londoners still remember the legacy of pie and mash shops in the East End. There was another reason eel dominated London's diet. Eels were hard to spoil. Beef turned dangerous within hours. Poultry rotted quickly. But eels lasted longer, especially when pickled, spiced, or baked. In a city without refrigeration, you trusted the foods that did not kill you. And eels had earned that trust. But beneath the practical reasons lies something deeper. The eel pie reflects a truth about working-class life. People will always find a way to endure. Victorians did not choose eel pies for flavor. They chose them to live. Even when the city failed them, with pollution, disease, long hours, and low wages, they still found a way to survive. You finish your pie. The fog rolls in again. Somewhere behind you, the Thames laps quietly against the wall, as if reminding you that tomorrow there will be more eels, more work, and more lives pressing forward. You wipe crumbs from your hands. Take a breath. Step back into the street. And keep walking, just as millions did before you. And now, our journey continues to the next strange breakfast on the Victorian menu. A dish of vinegar, sea creatures, and a generous splash of liquor. Brace yourself. This one is unforgettable. As the morning crowd begins to thin near the eel pie stand, you wipe your hands, glance around, and continue wandering deeper into the market. The noise shifts. Somewhere behind you, a cart rattles over cobblestones. A bell rings in the distance. You turn a corner and find a new cluster of vendors. The kind that cater to customers who want something quick, cheap, and strong enough to jolt their senses awake. Here, you notice a wooden stall surrounded by chipped bowls, cloudy bottles, and a small sea of empty shells. A cracked sign hangs loosely from a nail. It reads, "Whelks and gin best for breakfast." You pause, unsure if you read that correctly. Breakfast. You expected porridge or bread, perhaps. But this is Victorian London. And here, breakfast does not always look the way you expect. For many of the poorest workers, the morning meal was not about comfort. It was not about sweetness or softness. It was about shock, heat, and urgency. Something to wake the body, warm the blood, and numb the edges of hunger before the workday began. The vendor, a wiry man with sleeves rolled to his elbows, scoops a ladle into a large metal container, filled with vinegar-soaked Whelks small sea snails with a rubbery texture and briny aroma. The smell is powerful and sharp, cutting through the morning fog. He lifts a bowl, pours in the whelks, and hands it to a woman who does not hesitate for even a heartbeat. She chews slowly, then reaches for a cup of gin. That is when you realize this is not just food. This is a ritual. The whelks, pickled in vinegar, salt, and spices, are sour enough to wake the senses, and tough enough to demand effort. They must be chewed. They demand attention. After nights in cramped rooms or weeks of brutal labor, perhaps intensity was exactly what people needed. You step forward. The vendor hands you a bowl. Heat radiates through the chipped pottery. Steam rises, carrying the ocean with it. You lift a whelk with your fingers and take a bite. The texture is firm, almost stubborn. The flavor is bright, salty, and acidic. There is nothing gentle in this dish. It grabs your tongue and refuses to let go. Beside you, a man swallows his mouthful and immediately takes a sip of gin from a cloudy glass. The drink is harsh, unrefined, burning on the way down. He coughs once, clears his throat, and lets out a satisfied sigh. For him, this is not indulgence. It is armor, a shield against exhaustion, cold, and hunger. Gin in Victorian London was everywhere. Cheap, potent, easier to find than clean water. Paired with whelks, it created a 1-2 punch. A jolt for the mouth, fire for the chest. Around you, the scene becomes clearer. Chimney sweeps eating shoulder to shoulder. A 13-year-old messenger forcing down bites with quiet determination. A laundress holding her bowl with tired eyes and steady hands. Each person is here for strength, not pleasure. And in this moment, you understand something important. Flavor was secondary. Function was everything. The vendor moves quickly, refilling bowls, splashing gin, wiping his hands on an apron stained by 100 mornings. He nods at you as if to say, "Keep eating. You will need it." You take another bite. This time, the sharpness hits a little softer. Your tongue adjusts. Your mind clears. In a strange way, it works. You feel more awake, more focused, more alive than you did minutes ago. But this breakfast also reveals a darker truth. People were constantly running on empty, with long hours, little rest, and endless struggle. They clung to anything that could spark the body back to life. Whelks filled the stomach. Gin fueled the nerves. Together, they made just enough strength to face the day. This was the Victorian version of a strong coffee and a fast meal. No foam art, no pastries, just survival in a bowl. By the time you finish, your fingers smell faintly of brine, and your chest is warm from the gin. You hand back the bowl and step away from a stall. Behind you, spoons scrape bowls, and hurried voices blend into the buzz of the street. You are full for now, awake for now, ready for what comes next. And as you continue your walk through the market, you realize the morning has only just begun. Ahead lies an entire world of unusual dishes. Some hearty, some questionable, and some unforgettable. But before the day is over, you will witness one of the most notorious foods of the Victorian era. A dish made from blood, fat, oats, and secrecy. It is time to move toward the sizzling griddle of black pudding. A breakfast unlike any other. You continue down the narrow lane of the market, past the bowls of whelks and the sharp scent of vinegar, until a new aroma cuts through the morning air, heavy, smoky, and unmistakably rich. Is the smell of meat frying in fat, though your stomach is still full from breakfast. Curiosity guides your steps. The crowd grows denser, drawn by the same scent. Soon you find yourself standing in front of one of the most iconic griddles of Victorian street life. The black pudding stall. The vendor, a broad-shouldered man with a stained apron and a face weathered by heat and smoke, moves with swift, economic gestures. Thick slices of black pudding, dark, almost black in color, sizzle on a cast-iron pan, turning crisp at the edges. As plumes of savory steam curl upward, the sound is rhythmic. The hiss of fat, the scrape of a metal spatula, the thud of coins, the murmur of voices. Black pudding is not pudding as modern ears imagine it. It is a dense mixture of pig's blood, fat, onions, and oats, stuffed into a casing, fried on hot iron, and served by the slice. Is iron-rich, filling, and incredibly cheap. For Victorian workers, it was power on a plate. Calories that turned into muscle, stamina, and fuel. The vendor hands a steaming slice to a young man, who looks exhausted before his day has even begun. He takes one bite, nods in approval, and walks away with quick, determined strides. No slow eating, no savoring. There is no time for that in a city like this. You order a slice. The vendor drops it onto a piece of bread and hands it to you. You take your first bite. The flavor is intense, savory, earthy, and rich. Crisp on the outside, creamy within, heavy but satisfying. You can almost feel the calories sink into your bones, anchoring themselves for the hours ahead. But even as you eat, a thought lingers. In this era, eating meat on the street is always an act of trust, or perhaps denial, because for every honest vendor frying black pudding, there are others selling meat that is far more questionable. Not far from the griddle sits another stall, a butcher's cart draped in red and white cloth, its counter piled high with sausages of every shape and shade. A handwritten sign reads, "Sausages 1 penny." There is no list of ingredients, no labels, no guarantees. In Victorian London, meat was expensive, and waste was unthinkable. Every part of an animal, from the familiar cuts to the scraps no one spoke about, ended up somewhere. Often that somewhere was a sausage. Horse meat, stray dog meat, spoiled trimmings, hidden organs, and mystery scraps were ground together with oats, herbs, and fat, spiced heavily to bury unpleasant truths, and stuffed into a casing for the streets to consume. For the working class, it did not matter. Meat was meat, protein was survival, and hunger silenced questions. You watch customers buy sausages and bite into them without hesitation. Hope for flavor lights their eyes, mixed with an acceptance of risk. A man beside you shrugs and mutters, "What is the harm? Better than bread alone." You are not sure he believes it, but you understand. In a world where calories mean life, curiosity is a luxury, and caution is a privilege. You buy a sausage. The butcher hands it to you wrapped in paper. You take a bite. It is salty, peppery, and greasy enough to drip down your wrist. The taste is not good, not terrible, simply filling. And maybe, in the end, that was all it ever needed to be. Around you, the crowd grows, workers fueling up before scattering into the machinery of the city. Black pudding, mystery sausages, hot broth, cheap gin, not meals. Strategies. Strategies for endurance. Strategies for survival. You step away from a stall, the sounds of frying and bargaining fading behind you. Ahead lies another corner, another cart, another dish with a story of hunger and resilience. And now your path leads towards something stranger still. A bubbling iron pot filled with bones, broth, and gelatinous cuts that modern diners rarely touch. It is time to meet the world of cow's heel, tripe, and trotters, where nothing was wasted, and every bite told the truth about survival. The morning fog has begun to lift, but the chill never truly leaves the bones of Victorian London. You tuck your hands into your coat and continue down the cobbled street, where a new smell greets you dense, meaty, and strangely damp. It is not the crisp sizzle of fried fish, or the smoky charm of black pudding. No, this aroma is heavier, thicker, like steam rising from a wet cellar. You know you are close before you even see the cart. Then you spot it, a massive iron cauldron perched above glowing coals, its surface trembling as meaty chunks roll and bob beneath a cloudy broth. A handwritten sign swings from a nail. Cow's heel 1 penny a bowl, strength for the day. Victorian Londoners believed cow's heel was not just food. It was medicine, stamina, and miracle all in one. Thick in gelatin, full of cartilage, and simmered into wobbling submission. Cow's heel was the original street superfood for the poor. You take your place in the line. Ahead of you stands a group of factory workers, rubbing their hands together, eager for warmth. Behind you, a mother hushes her children, reminding them to eat slowly so the meal will last in their bellies. The vendor, sleeves rolled high, pulls a dripping slab from the pot. The skin jiggles. The bone gleams. Steam curls upward in ghostly ribbons. Your bowl arrives. The broth is thick, salty, and slightly opaque. The piece of cow heel inside looks like something halfway between food and an anatomy lesson. You take a bite. The texture is strange gelatinous on the outside, chewy beneath, clinging to your teeth with stubborn resolve. But the warmth spreads through your chest. And for a moment, you understand why people line up for it. This is survival food, ugly but effective. And as you eat, you realize something deeper. Victorian cuisine was not about preference. It was about possibility. Nothing makes this clearer than the next dish you encounter as you wander onward. Tripe. Not far from the heel cart stands a tripe shop. Its windows fogged with steam and ambition. When you push open the door, the smell strikes instantly. Mild at first, then unmistakable. Tripe, the stomach lining of cows, is bleached, boiled, and chopped into ribbons that curl like pale scrolls in a broth of onions, salt, and hope. The shop is crowded. Dock workers hunch over bowls, tearing bread and dipping it into broth. A pair of boys sit at the end of a long table, daring each other to slurp the largest piece. An elderly man in a worn coat eats slowly, eyes closed in, gratitude or concentration. Your serving arrives. White, bouncy strips of tripe glistening in broth. You lift the spoon and take a bite. The texture is soft yet springy, like chewing a thick page of damp parchment. The flavor is mild, relying entirely on salt and onion. Not delicious, not dreadful, just there. But as you chew, a thought forms. Tripe is not a meal. It is a metaphor, a testament to Victorian perseverance. If nothing could be wasted, then everything must be eaten, even the stomach of an animal. The broth warms your hands and fills your stomach. But the adventure does not end there. Just when you think Victorian cuisine has shown you its limits, the city offers one final challenge. Trotters, sheep's feet to be exact, sold from pushcarts near factories and shipyards. Trotters are boiled until the skin gleams and the tendons soften. The vendor hands you a pair wrapped in paper, which immediately turns translucent. The steam hits your face. The smell hits a moment. Later, you bite in. The skin is thick. The fat is sticky. The marrow is rich. It is messy, primal, and oddly satisfying. No knives. No forks. Just teeth, fingers, and determination. You glance around. Men bite and grin through greasy mouths. Children gnaw bones like determined squirrels. Women eat delicately, but with equal confidence. There is laughter, chatter, and a strange sense of pride. Because trotters, like heel and tripe, are more than food. They are identity. They represent a London that refuses to break even when resources are thin. A London that turns scraps into sustenance. A London that knows how to survive. And as you finish the last bite, wiping your hands on your coat, feeling the broth still warm in your stomach, you understand the truth. Victorian cuisine was not about taste. It was about endurance. Every bowl, every bite, every chew was an act of resilience. Ahead, other smells drift through the air. Jellied eels, questionable stews, and something sweet that may or may not be safe. London is a feast of curiosity, and your journey through its strangest dishes is far from over. You step back into the fog, ready for whatever comes next. The fog rolls in again as the day wears on, and you follow the scent of salt and vinegar through a narrow London alley. You turn a corner, and there it is. A glass display case atop a weathered cart, its contents glistening beneath the flicker of a gas lamp. Inside rests one of the most infamous dishes in all of Victorian cuisine. Jellied eels. The vendor, cheeks red from the cold and apron dusted with dried salt, scoops a wobbling portion onto a cracked plate. The eels, chopped into neat curves, are suspended in a glistening jelly, made by boiling eel bones for hours until the liquid thickens on its own. The dish trembles like dessert, but its aroma is unmistakably marine, briny, sharp, and stubborn. You take your fork, tap the jelly, and it wobbles with the enthusiasm of a street performer. Victorian Londoners swore by this dish. Not for luxury, but for practicality. Eels were cheap, abundant, and almost impossible to spoil, even in the polluted waters of the Thames. In a city where freshness was rare, and refrigeration did not exist, eel became the protein of the working class. You brace yourself and take a bite. The jelly is cold, salty, and oddly refreshing. The eel is firm, chewy, and tastes of river water and determination. You swallow, and just like that, you have joined generations of Londoners who fueled their days with this curious delicacy. Workers ate it on lunch breaks. Children dared each other to swallow without chewing. Grandmothers insisted it built character. And perhaps it did. You feel a little tougher already. But the cold jelly leaves you craving warmth. So you continue your walk, and soon find a small crowd huddled around a steaming copper urn. A painted sign above it reads, "Salup hot and cheering." Salup is no tea, no coffee, and certainly no cocoa. Is made from ground orchid root or sassafras, simmered with milk and sugar until it becomes thick, soothing, and slightly floral. You purchase a mug and wrap your hands around its chipped surface. The first sip surprises you. Warm, velvety, and sweet, with a gentle, custard-like aftertaste. In that moment, you understand its appeal. For the poor, Salup was comfort in a cup. For the cold, it was survival. Around you, the scene is almost tender. Dock workers sip slowly, letting steam warm their faces. Street children share sips from the same tin cup. A mother presses a mug into her daughter's hands and whispers, "Drink before it cools." In the midst of London's harshness, drinks like Salup were small miracles. But not all beverages were so kind, because sooner or later, every Victorian Londoner faced milk. A gamble in liquid form. You follow a small crowd to a busy street corner, where a milkmaid arrives with pails hanging from a wooden yoke. If you are lucky, there is a cow trailing behind her. If you are unlucky, it is a goat. Either way, the milk is ladled on the spot into your cup. Fresh, yes, but also unfiltered, unpasteurized, and occasionally enhanced with chalk, flour, or river water to stretch the supply. You take a careful sip. The milk is warm, creamy, a little grassy, and just a bit unpredictable. Children drink happily. Adults drink cautiously. Everyone drinks hopefully, because milk in Victorian London was not just a beverage. It was trust. Trust in the milkmaid. Trust in luck. And trust in your own stomach. As the day darkens and hunger rises again, you search for one last comfort. A hot cup of coffee. Eventually, you find a modest stall, its sign proudly declaring, "Hot coffee, 1 halfpenny." The vendor pours you a cup from a dented urn. It is steaming, bold-smelling, and deeply brown. You lift it to your lips and sip, and sputter. This coffee tastes confused. A bitter mix of roasted chicory, burnt bread, and maybe a roasted pea or two. Actual coffee beans were expensive, so vendors stretched their supplies with whatever they could roast, grind, and disguise beneath a layer of sugar. Is not delicious, is not refined, but it is hot, and it wakes you up. In Victorian London, that was enough. You look around. Others sip the same drink with quiet acceptance. Some add a drop of milk if they can afford it. Others stir in sugar to mask the bitterness. A young apprentice takes a gulp, winces, then nods like a soldier accepting fate. In a world that demanded strength, even coffee became a test of resilience. And as you finish your cup, you feel that resilience building in you too. Jellied eels tested your courage. Salup soothed your spirit. Milk tested your luck. Coffee tested your will. These were more than drinks and dishes. They were daily battles in a city that never paused, never softened, and never fed its people gently. You step once more into the London night, warmed, seasoned, and ready for whatever strange meal awaits next. Somewhere in the distance, vendors are calling, cauldrons are bubbling, and the city is setting its table again. Your journey continues. Evening settles over London yet again, and for a moment the city seems softer. The smoke is thinner, the streets quieter, and through the fog you can hear a different kind of sound. Lighter, brighter, almost musical. Children, laughing. You follow the echoes until the scent of sugar dances through the cold air. There, beneath the glow of a gas lamp, stands a candyman's cart. Its glass jars stacked high, gleaming like treasure. If Victorian food was often gray, brown, or suspicious, this cart is the exception. It is color. It is excitement. Is childhood in a jar. You step closer. The Candyman, mustache waxed into careful curls, lifts a lid and scoops out a handful of glittering sweets. Sugar plums, barley twists, boiled candies in red, yellow, and green. Each piece shines as if lit from within. Children crowd around, tugging on sleeves and waving pennies, their eyes wide with the kind of desperate joy only sugar can produce. You trade a coin for a single candy. It is cold, glossy, and unexpectedly heavy. The first taste is pure sweetness, a bright spark on your tongue that cuts through the bitterness of London life. For a moment, you understand why Victorian children adored these treats. They were rare happiness, small enough to fit in a pocket. Yet beneath the sweetness lurks a hidden truth. Many of these candies were colored with chemicals no modern parent would dare allow. Copper for green, lead for red, arsenic for yellow. The Victorians did not know, or did not want to know. They only knew that children smiled. And for a penny, that was enough. You finish your candy, enjoying the moment, and wander deeper into the market, where barrels of pickled vegetables line the street. Cucumbers, onions, carrots, cabbage, floating in brine that smells of vinegar, salt, and desperation. Victorians loved pickles for one simple reason. They lasted. In a world without refrigerators, vinegar was as valuable as gold. You take a pickled cucumber and bite. Crunch. Sharp, sour, and tongue-tingling. Not elegant, not gentle, but bold. Around you, workers eat pickles as snacks. Children nibble cabbage leaves, and housewives buy jars to stretch dinners for one more day. Pickles, unlike sweets, were not joy. They were strategy. Then your eye catches the fruit stall beside it. Pyramids of apples, pears, and plums. The fruit is bruised, blotched, and imperfect. But fruit is fruit, and sweetness in any form is a blessing. Victorian Londoners bought what they could afford, and if an apple had a spot, they simply ate around it. Waste was a luxury no one had. You buy an apple and taste its sharp, natural sweetness. It is refreshing, yet fleeting, because across the street a new sound rises. A cheer light and excited. A new crowd. Children again. You follow the noise and discover the summer delight that defined Victorian childhood. Penny ice. A man stands behind a cart packed with blocks of ice, each glistening under a layer of syrup. He scrapes thin shavings into a paper cup and pours a ribbon of bright liquid over the top. Strawberry red, lime green, lemon yellow. The colors glow unnaturally, almost too perfect to be real. And perhaps they were not. Like candy, penny ice was often flavored with mystery, not fruit. You hand over a coin and take a cautious lick. Cold, sweet, shockingly refreshing. For a moment, the weight of the city vanishes. Children race each other to finish, syrup running down their hands, staining their lips bright, red or green. They do not care about ingredients. They care about joy. And penny ice delivered joy cheap. But even here, the Victorian gamble remained. Some syrups were delicious. Others tasted like perfume, metal, or medicine. Some ice was clean. Others, less so. Ice was cut from rivers or imported on ships. stored in sawdust, and melted and refrozen again and again. A refreshing treat could also be a risky experiment. Still, as your penny ice disappears, you feel lighter. And you begin to understand something. Pleasure was rare. But when it appeared, Victorians seized it without hesitation. Candy brought joy. Pickles brought resilience. Fruit brought hope. Penny ice brought escape. These were not just snacks. They were survival in emotional form. Small comforts in a city that demanded endurance. Sweetness that softened the edges of poverty, even if only for minutes. As you walk away from the market, wiping syrup from your fingers, you feel the balance of Victorian life settle around you. Pleasure and danger, sweetness and risk, hunger and hope. London may have been harsh, but its people were experts at finding delight. In scraps, smiles, and sugar crystals. And tomorrow they would return to the same carts, coins in hand, to chase joy all over again. Night falls over London, and the city changes character. By day it is frantic, grimy, and relentless. But by evening it becomes something else entirely. A world of glowing lamps and wet cobblestones, where reflections stretch like ribbons of glass beneath the fog. The scent of hot street food drifts through narrow alleys. Hunger does not rest when the sun sinks behind the smog. If anything, it sharpens. And this is when Victorian fast food comes alive. You follow the sound of sizzling oil until you find a small crowd. A battered street cart stands at the center. An iron pan bubbling over hot coals. A man in a flour-stained apron plunges battered fish into the fat. The aroma hits instantly warm, salty, irresistible. This is fried fish, the ancestor of the dish that would one day become fish and chips. For now there are no chips, just fish, hot, crispy, and wrapped in a scrap of yesterday's newspaper. The vendor works with astonishing rhythm. Dunk, sizzle, flip, scoop, salt, wrap, coin. Next. No menus, no plates, no ceremony. In Victorian London, fast food is exactly what the name promises. Fast, cheap, and eaten on foot. You take a bite. The crust shatters. The inside is soft, flaky, and deeply satisfying. A splash of malt vinegar adds a sharp kick. And for a moment, you feel warm from the inside out. Around you, people stand shoulder to shoulder. Factory workers finishing their shift. Maids on a rare night off. Street boys clutching dinner like treasure. For once, there is equality here. Everyone eats the same way. Standing in the same fog. Licking the same grease from their fingers. But the night has more to offer. A few streets away, the glow of windows and the scent of gravy pull you inside a pie shop. The door creaks as you enter, and the heat washes over you like a blanket. Shelves are stacked with pies, their golden lids cracking with steam. Pigeon pie, mutton pie, or the dreaded mystery pie. You pay your coin and receive a small, heavy parcel wrapped in paper. You sit at a narrow counter and take a first bite. The crust is dense, built for durability, not delicacy. The filling is peppery and rich, though impossible to identify. Is it lamb? Is it pigeon? Is it something that used to bark? Better not to ask. Victorian pie makers had one rule: waste nothing. If it could be minced, spiced, and hidden under pastry, it became dinner. Around you, the little shop thrums with life. Laborers debate which pie shop is the best in London. A seamstress eats slowly, savoring every mouthful. Two boys share one pie, taking turns, laughing as they burn their tongues. The air is thick with steam, pepper, and conversation. When you finish, you step back into the cold, only to discover the final star of Victorian fast food, dripping toast. A woman stands over a tiny griddle, selling thick slices of bread fried in beef drippings saved from the Sunday roast. The sign reads, "Dripping toast a farthing." One of the cheapest street foods in London. Fat and bread. Nothing more. But in a city where calories equal survival, this snack is a favorite. You buy a slice. It arrives hot and shiny, instantly staining the paper beneath it. The first bite hits like a hammer. Rich, salty, overwhelmingly savory. Then something unexpected happens. You want another bite. And another. It tastes like warmth. Like fullness. Like energy. Fuel disguised as a treat. Children love it. Exhausted workers depend on it. Mothers spread dripping on toast at home to stretch the week's food. Standing beneath the flickering gas lamps with grease on your fingers, you see Victorian London with sudden clarity. Its food is not designed to impress. It is designed to endure. Fish for speed. Pie for strength. Dripping for survival. These meals are not elegant, but they are effective. They fill stomachs. They warm hands. They allow thousands to wake up tomorrow and try again. And in that sense, they are the true heartbeat of London's nightly streets. You brush crumbs from your coat. Laughter rises down the lane. More vendors are setting up, each guarding a pot of something strange, hearty, or questionable. The night is far from over, and neither is your journey through the city's strangest menu. The night deepens, but Victorian London shows no sign of slowing down. You turn a corner and find a tight cluster of food stalls beneath swaying lanterns. Steam rises in thick white clouds. Voices overlap. The air smells complicated, savory, sour, smoky, and faintly rotten all at once. This is where London hides its flavors. Behind jars, bottles, and barrels, you sit on an empty crate with a fresh pie in hand. It is hot, but the first bite tells you something is missing. No spice, no depth, nothing to wake it up. You look around searching, and then you see it. A bottle of Victorian ketchup. You pour a small puddle, expecting tomato comfort. Instead, a dark, earthy scent rises. Not bright, not sweet, but damp like a cellar after rain. You dip your pie. You take a bite. Not tomato. Not even close. Mushroom ketchup, the working man's favorite. Fermented mushrooms, salt, vinegar. Sometimes anchovies, sometimes walnuts. Sometimes just bravery. Tomato ketchup did exist, but only for those with coins to spare. The poor made do. They always made do. The aftertaste lingers like a secret, but no one complains. Not here. Not ever. In Victorian London, flavor itself is a luxury. If something adds taste, even a strange one, it is welcomed. You stand and follow the crowd to the next stall. A line of barrels filled with vegetables floating in cloudy brine. Pickles, cucumbers, onions, cabbage, carrots. Crisp if you are lucky. Questionable if you are not. The vendor spears a cucumber and hands it to you. One bite, and your eyes blink awake. Sharp vinegar, heavy salt, a sour punch that grabs your tongue. Workers chomp pickles beside hunks of bread. Children gnaw pickled cabbage like candy. Housewives buy jars to stretch thin stews into tomorrow. Pickles tasted like survival, and survival had a flavor. But vinegar could only mask so much. So you move on, drawn by a cheerful splash of color. A fruit cart. At first glance, it looks hopeful. Apples, pears, plums, berries. Then you notice the bruises, the dents, the decay sneaking in at the edges. Fresh fruit was expensive. Storage was poor. Time was cruel. You buy an apple anyway. Its sweetness survives, but only just. Bright on the tongue, with a sour shadow close behind. Nobody wastes a bite. Not here. Not ever. Mothers slice away rot. Children share bruised pears. Workers tuck apples into pockets for the long night shift. Imperfection is not a flaw. It is reality. Finally, A vendor offers what every Victorian table needs: spice, pepper to spark flavor, salt to hide age, mustard so strong it clears the sinuses. Spices do not transform food. They disguise it. They rewrite the truth just long enough to swallow without thinking. You glance at your empty pie paper. The last streak of mushroom ketchup. The pickle tang still buzzing on your tongue. And the soft sweetness of that bruised apple fading. That is when it hits you. Victorian flavor was not born from abundance. It was born from necessity, from scraps, from salvage, from masking what could not be fixed. Pickles brought bite. Ketchup brought depth. Fruit brought sweetness. Spices brought illusion. Every flavor was effort. Every meal was invention. And every bite was a negotiation between hunger and hope. You rise from the crate, wipe your hands on your coat, and step back into the fog. A lantern flickers. A vendor shouts. A pot boils somewhere in the dark. There is more to see, more to taste, more to survive. London's menu is far from finished, and neither are you. Midnight settles over London like a heavy wool blanket. Muffling sound, but not scent. The streets are slick with fog and chimney soot. Lanterns flicker in the damp air as you wander through twisting alleys, searching for something, anything to warm your stomach before sleep. Respectable shops have closed. The crowds have thinned. The city's heartbeat has slowed to a low, restless pulse. But hunger never sleeps, and neither do the vendors who feed it. Up ahead, in a pool of wavering gaslight, you spot a small crowd gathered around a battered wooden cart. The vendor lifts a tiny ceramic pot and cracks open its lid. Potted shrimps, a midnight indulgence for those who crave richness on a poor man's coin. Preserved in spiced butter, the shrimps glisten gold under the lamp. You pay. You taste. The butter melts instantly on your tongue. The shrimp is soft, ocean sweet, luxurious. For one fleeting moment, and then it is gone. Barely a bite. The hunger remains. So you keep walking. Further down the lane, a second vendor raises the lid of his dish, and the sight stops you where you stand. A quivering block of pork jelly, pale and translucent, with shredded meat suspended inside like fossils in amber. He slices a slab. He sets it on a tin plate. He hands it to you with a look that is half pity, half pride. You hesitate. Then you eat. Cold, salty, dense, strangely filling. Not pleasant, but effective. Because no one eating at midnight is chasing elegance. They are chasing warmth, sleep, strength for tomorrow. Around you, the scene is quiet and raw. Men scoop jelly onto stale bread. A young woman eats in silence, shivering between bites. Two boys share a plate, swallowing fast before someone decides they have not paid enough. There is no judgment here, only endurance. But even these plates feel almost luxurious compared to what waits around the next corner. You smell it before you see it. An aroma thick as smoke and twice as mysterious. You turn into an open square where a great iron cauldron rests above glowing embers. This is the domain of the rag and bone man. Nighttime scavenger, accidental chef, king of the leftovers. His broth is infamous, not for its flavor, but for its purpose. He gathers discarded bones from butchers, wilted vegetables from market stalls, scraps from kitchen doors, anything remotely edible. All of it goes into the pot. All of it becomes soup for a single penny. You receive a dented tin cup and a ladle of steaming liquid. You drink. The broth is surprisingly hearty. Salty, smoky, rich with marrow and fat. But now and then your teeth meet something chewy, something gristly, something unidentifiable. You keep going. Everyone does. Around the cauldron, a silent community has formed. Laborers cradle their cups like medicine. Mothers lift bowls to their children's lips, urging, finish every drop. Even stray dogs sit waiting for bones, still clinging to scraps of meat. Nothing is wasted. Ever. In the fire's glow, the truth becomes clear. Victorian midnight food is not about taste. It is about survival. Dinner is for comfort. Breakfast is for energy. But midnight meals, they are for endurance. Made from what is left, not what is chosen. Built on gratitude, not preference. And somehow, there's a quiet, battered beauty in that. You drain the last of the broth. Warmth spreads through your chest. Fatigue settles into your bones. You hand back the cup. The rag and bone man nods. No words. None needed. You step into the fog once more. Distant hooves. Clinking bottles. A baby crying behind a thin wall. Boots on wet stone. Wine through chimney pots. The night is cold, but your body is warmer now. You have eaten what London eats when no one is watching. You have tasted the city without disguise. And as you walk toward the darkness, you realize something profound. This, more than any royal banquet, is the true meal of Victorian London. Humble, improvised, shared, unforgettable. Dawn creeps into London quietly, not with warmth, but with a gray and reluctant light. It seeps through narrow alleys and settles on windows streaked with soot. The city wakes slowly, stiffly, like an old machine grinding back to motion. Factory whistles will soon scream across the rooftops. Carts will flood the streets. Footsteps will multiply until London once again growls with hunger, noise, and urgency. But before that happens, the workers need fuel. Not feasts. Not comfort. Just something hot enough, strong enough, or strange enough to push them through another long day. You step back onto the street. You are sleepy, sore, and still tasting the late-night broth from hours before. That memory lingers like a ghost. But the cold morning air snaps your mind forward. It is time to find breakfast. Or at least something that pretends to be breakfast. The first scent that reaches you is tea. Real tea for those who can afford it. Imitation tea for everyone else. A small stall waits at the edge of a busy lane, its kettle rattling over hot coals. Workers gather around it, hands stretched toward the rising steam. Tea in Victorian London is ritual. It is morale. It is medicine. A penny buys a thin cup hot tannic and sometimes steeped so long it tastes like liquid bark. You drink it anyway. The heat slips through your fingers and down your throat. For a moment, you feel alive again. Not far from the tea stall, a second vendor pours something darker and less trustworthy. Coffee, at least by name. The urn steams. The cup is cheap. And the taste is unpredictable. You sip. It is bitter, burnt, and strangely earthy. That earthiness comes from chicory, roasted peas, or scorched breadcrumbs used to stretch the real beans. But nobody here is chasing flavor. They are chasing alertness. One sip opens your eyes. Another sharpens your thoughts. The drink is crude, but it works. A boy beside you gulps his cup like a warrior draining a goblet. His face twists, but he does not stop. Everyone here understands the bargain. Taste is optional. Energy is essential. The sun climbs. The streets fill. Breakfast lines form on every corner. Some stalls serve something gentler, rice milk or almond water. Cheaper. Softer. Kinder to fragile stomachs and empty pockets. You stop for a cup. The liquid is pale and lightly sweetened. Rice milk is thin but comforting. Almond water is fragrant but inconsistent. You sip and discover a mild sweetness, soft warmth, and no bitterness at all. In a city where even food can feel aggressive, this quiet sweetness is a mercy. Children cling to these cups. The elderly choose them. The sick depend on them. You drink slowly. Around you, conversations stay soft and tired. No one has fully woken. No one truly wants to, but everyone must. Nearby, workers unwrap their rations: cold bread, leftover potatoes, or a lump of cheese if fortune is kind. Others eat nothing, saving every coin for later. This morning ritual reveals more about Victorian life than any grand feast ever could. The city is built on endurance, not indulgence. Its breakfasts are not meant to delight. They are meant to keep bodies standing. A foreman slams his cup onto a barrel and marches toward the factory gate. A group of women draw their shawls tight and hurry toward their shift. A yawning child stumbles after his mother, clutching a crust of bread like treasure. You finish your cup and breathe in the cold again. The fragile quiet of morning is gone. London is fully awake. The grind has begun. Victorian London does not care how tired you are. It does not care how hungry you remain. It does not care how little you slept. It only cares that you keep moving. And somehow, through weak tea, bitter coffee, sweet rice milk, and almond water that tastes like diluted hope, people do exactly that. They rise. They eat what they can. They go. And so do you. You walk on, carried by the rhythm of thousands of feet and thousands of stomachs. Breakfast is finished, though hunger never truly is. Your journey through London's strange and relentless menu continues. There are still dishes to discover, still flavors to face, still stories simmering in pots, pans, and alleyways. You push forward into the day. The day winds down once more, and London sinks back into its familiar darkness. You walk slowly through the streets you have come to know, streets filled with voices, smoke, and stories etched into every stone. The markets are closing. The cauldrons are cooling. The final scraps of food are being swept from the cobbles. The city exhales, as if exhausted by its own appetite. And as you look back on everything you have tasted, witnessed, and survived, the journey begins to make a different kind of sense. Victorian food was never really about food, not in the way we think of it today. It was not about choice. It was not about indulgence. It was not about pleasure. It was about resilience. It was about people who woke up hungry and went to bed hungry, yet still found strength to work, laugh, raise children, and hope for better days. Every dish, no matter how unpleasant or unusual, had a purpose. Eel pies fed entire neighborhoods. Pickles pushed back against winter. Black pudding kept iron in tired bodies. Rag and bone broth made sure no one was left entirely empty. Even the strangest meals, the jelly, the trotters, the bitter coffee, the questionable fruit, were proof of a simple truth. People will always find a way to survive, even when the world gives them very little. As you walk, you pass the river. The same river that fed, poisoned, sustained, and endangered Londoners all at once. The Thames reflects the moon in broken silver. In its ripples, you see the truth of Victorian life: harsh, dirty, chaotic, but undeniably alive. And suddenly, the food makes perfect sense. The city ate the way it lived. Rough, improvised, unfiltered, nothing wasted, nothing taken for granted. You pause at a bridge and watch the faint lights flickering across the water. In that moment, you feel something unexpected: gratitude. Gratitude for warm meals in your modern life, for clean kitchens and fresh ingredients, for safe water, for labels, for refrigerators, for the luxury of saying, "I do not want this, I will eat something else." Choice is invisible until you lose it. The Victorians did not have choice. They had necessity, and necessity shaped their plates and their character. But there is another lesson too, gentle and enduring. Even in hardship, people still searched for sweetness. Children begged for penny candy. Families shared pies. Workers lined up for hot fish on cold nights. A sip of salop, a bruised apple, a spoonful of jelly, sometimes that was enough to brighten an entire day. Life was heavy, but people still chased flavor. And somehow they found it. You continue down the empty street. The shops are shuttered now, their signs swaying in the wind. A pie shop window reflects your passing shadow. A cold fish cart waits to be hauled away. A lone pickle barrel rests beside a wall, ready to be rolled indoors. The city is quiet, and for the first time, you feel a strange peace here. Not because Victorian London was gentle, it was not, but because its people were strong, imaginative, stubborn, and endlessly resourceful. They wrote recipes out of scraps. They built lives out of leftovers. They endured what might break many of us today. Tonight, as the last market lamps go dark, you step away from the noise of history and return to your own time. The fog closes behind you. The river stills, and London fades back into silence. You carry with you the story of a city that learned to survive with whatever it had. And perhaps, in a world that still demands endurance in different ways, that lesson matters more than ever. Not every meal will be perfect. Not every day will be easy. But as long as there is warmth, humor, creativity, and the will to keep going, there's always a way forward. You take a slow breath. The night settles. The journey ends. And now, wherever you are beneath blankets, on a couch, or in a quiet room with dim lights and soft thoughts, let your mind rest. Let the streets of old London drift into the distance. Let the fog close gently behind you. The city will still be there tomorrow. Its stories will wait patiently for your return. For tonight, sleep well. You have walked far, tasted enough, and earned your rest. Thank you for traveling through history with me. And until our next story, good night. Crescent Moon.